Right now, we're going to have an individual speaker, and the topic is creating corporate partnerships to revitalize Malaysian cities. Okay, and for this particular topic, we have Mr. Hamdan Majeed from the Managing Director of Think City, who's already on screen. Just before I say hello, how are you to our wonderful friend, Mr. Hamdan, I just want to introduce him and tell you a little bit about Think City. Think City is a social purpose organization with a mission of making cities more people-friendly, resilient, and livable. Don't forget, if an environment is livable, then it has a very good chance of attracting investors and people to do business in that particular location. Hamdan is also the co-author of the book Cities, People, and the Economy, a studying on positioning Penang. So he is very much a subject matter expert, SME, on this very interesting topic. Mr. Hamdan, how are you?
Very fine, thank you, Wadi, for your kind introduction. I look forward to sharing our experiences in this forum.
Yes, I wanted to actually go further with your achievements in terms of what you've achieved in your career, but I think if I do that, I'll be taking up 20 minutes of your talking time. So I won't do that. So, Encik Hamdan or Mr. Hamdan, please start your presentation and inspire us with this very interesting topic about, creating corporate partnerships to revitalize Malaysian cities and making everybody a thinking city.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Chandana for inviting us to join this wonderful forum. And I think that this forum is happening at the timely moment in terms of shaping the next decade of Malaysia's growth and progress. So it's in this context that my presentation is focused about arguing a case about the role of the creative cities, as well as how can we establish this through partnerships and collaboration. I will be covering these 7 key areas about, briefly about us and why the cultural economy, our experience in Georgetown and our subsequent expansion, some case study in other parts of the world, as well as then closing out with some of the key takeaways. As the host has, the MCA has highlighted that we are a social purpose organization driven by impact. Our mission is to make cities resilient, people-friendly by being a catalyst for change in the way cities are planned, curated, developed, and celebrated. It's our 10th year since we have been established, and it's been a wonderful decade of experience. We have, over the decade now, we have built capabilities in the area of placemaking, resilience, analytics, and conservation. The slides will be available for you all to have and from the organizers. Essentially, what we have done over this period has been that we have been working at a very large macro scale of territorial planning down to a very micro scale in terms of upgrading and improving laneways or buildings, working with the city government and so on. The approach we very much take on is actually an evidence-based learning approach and very experimental in nature. And Think City has, we believe that the fundamental is about working in the intersection between public, private, and people. And finding ways of finding the synergies that allows the collaboration to take place and create the value creation for ourselves and in the economy. Now, the cultural economy is something that's been much talked about. The cultural and the creative sector has seemed to be. We heard earlier today the role and the importance of the cultural and creative economy to the country. This is some data points just to affirm. I'm just going to ask the organizer, are you able to see the slides on the screen?
Yep, we're okay now. I'm sorry, we just had a slight technical glitch there where we lost you for about 8 seconds. So we do apologize. So if you can rewind 8 seconds a bit, just press the rewind button and take it away.
You're able to see the screen now?
It's back to black now.
Okay, I think I know what's the problem. Maybe it's because it's on presentation mode. It's probably I will just present it from what do you call
Yeah, that's very clear, that one. This slide here is very clear.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, just take it from the beginning again, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just go backwards. Yep.
All right. I think the cultural economy is becoming and is becoming much important for countries, particularly the countries like Malaysia that is moved into a middle income and moving into up the high income. The sector itself globally now has grown to nearly more than $2 trillion, and this large number of jobs has been created. It is globally it is represented by nearly 10% in terms of contribution to GDP, and it is significantly becoming an important and a critical part of the economy of emerging countries as well as those developed countries. There's in a report, a lot of this data point has been come from a report that recently published in 2018, reshaping cultural policies by UNESCO. And similarly, I think we have looked also in countries like where these markets have matured, we have seen that they have become a very significant part of the local economy, not only in terms of job creation, but also in terms of creating spillover effects that creates a larger amount in terms of value-added production and exports. The data is on the screen. I hope that you are able to see it. The creative and cultural economy in Malaysia, I think we heard today, accounts for nearly 2% of our GDP as of the latest data that's indicated. It's valued nearly $50 billion ringgits in Malaysia, and it employs nearly 1 million people. So definitely it's a very significant part and requires adequate amount of attention. But there is various parts of what you call the cultural ecosystem, where we see that it's not only about cultural and creative, but also it's about innovation, technology, and science that can also be connected, because eventually the intersection of this value is what creates the value addition. As we know that this is sort of like a spectrum of areas where the cultural and creative sectors are interrelated, from visual arts to cultural sites, print media, traditional cultural expressions, design, creative services, performing arts, and audiovisual arts. And obviously there are a lot of hosts of supporting spillover industries that relates to this, from tourism, sports, education, retail, construction, that can benefit from the cultural and creative sector. Obviously, there's the new phase of a lot of this growth in the cultural and creative sector has been in the new media, particularly in the world that is digitizing, where software, video games, digitized creative contents are becoming very central and important. And fundamentally, the future is going to be enabled by the digital infrastructure, where we see a lot more adaptation and use of digital tools in the process of adapting the cultural and creative sector for the future. This includes VR, AR, robotics, and so on. However, I think the challenge lies in the sense that I don't think the individual components of the sector can be a standalone on its own, but rather the value add, a significant value add or synergy will come from the synergy that connects or creates the interconnection across all of this different sector. And we believe that what you call the cultural and creative sector has got a great level playing field for anyone who wants to enter this marketplace. It is not like in the industrial economy where you need to have huge amount of capital investment, but rather we see there is a great opportunity for new entrants and continuous amount of new participants to shape the sector. Now, the cultural economy and cultural creative sector cannot live in isolation, as we said, that what you call, we know that in economic terms that there is always the primary sector, which is mining, agriculture, fishery, forestry, which is basically natural. It's an extraction part of the economy. The secondary sector is the conversion of the extraction into manufactured products in goods and services. And the tertiary sector is the value addition. And the cultural creative sector sits in the intersection of all of this. Now, the key lies in a sense that how does it become a very central part of everybody's life, from people who are in public agencies down to private sector and communities. And we believe that shift is what is needed to provide a kind of high-level focus to create a dynamism in the creative and cultural industries in Malaysia. Now, obviously, there's a lot of questions that we can ask about what's the pathways, in the sense that there's no unique single pathway for the cultural creative sector, but there's many different pathways. And we have seen this experience happening in different parts of the world. Different countries have taken different routes. and they all have been able to produce success by virtue that they're able to integrate and create synergies. Now, this is an example of how this has been done in Korea. Nearly 25 years ago, the culture creative sector was nascent and at the very infancy. And Korea was never known for any form of, it's not wrong for me to say culture and creativity was not actually part of the Korean lifestyle, and especially when the face of Korea was seen to be very industrial. But there's a huge transformation that we have seen in 25 years, where from the world has been taken by storm. From everyone is now is overwhelmed by K-pop, K-dramas, K-beauties, to Korean fast food, Korean lifestyle, and everything else. Tourism has boomed, the creative production has come, new technologies have emerged, and so on. So Korea has been an example of how that it has fueled a whole entire new economic sector and create millions of new jobs that has then now become a fuel for Korea, and in fact has positioned Korea on the global map. Similarly, I think we have seen over the last 2 decades, there's a huge amount of effort across globally, that across different countries, that has been expanding their investment to the cultural creative sector, in whether it's in Singapore to West Kowloon, Abu Dhabi, Brooklyn, and so on, where there's a focal point to create, in fact, go beyond supporting the creation of cultural creativities to even to establish cultural districts where these activities are being located and supported in a more systematic and cohesive manner. Creativity and culture and innovation can all intersect in a strong cultural district, and we believe this is going to be one way to focus and you take advantage of our own, where we believe that there's a place advantage that Malaysia can position itself for the future. Malaysia has got a great, rich, diverse assets, whether it's in our built heritage, it's in our intangible heritage, in our natural heritage. And the challenge lies in the sense that how can all of this contribute to connect both the cultural and the creative, basically arts, heritage, and culture can be part and connected to digital tech and innovation to create the new types of production that eventually that there's a global marketplace for consumption. Cultural districts, as I think as I highlighted earlier, saying that these are some of the social benefits, aside from the fact that it will help to improve heritage conservation, develop social capital, it's also got significant economic outcome, whereby, not only will it contribute to increase in dollars spent in the tourism sector, but rather it will contribute to agglomeration economic benefits from density and availability of talent and industries. Let me just use an experience over the last decade where we have worked systematically to support the rehabilitation and regeneration of Georgetown. And maybe that story of Georgetown could also inspire for other cities to look at and consider a pathway forward. Georgetown, as many of you know, has been our lab, and we have been established over a decade. And we chose intendedly by virtue of the fact that we were established to have a presence here in Penang. Think City established this as our living lab. And as you all know that, the Georgetown's history has always been founded on being historically an important port city. But over the years, since independence, the idea of a port city lost its purpose and the city fell into decay and decline. But however, in 2008, Georgetown was listed as a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Cultural Site. In fact, it's one of the important living cities that UNESCO identified for listing, and because of its rich cultural heritage and rich built heritage as well as intangible heritage, the city has found a new purpose and new vocation. When UNESCO had listed the city, it was in a state of decay to large extent or neglect, and things were very much on a standstill and was on a slow pathway of decline. It was through a program that we call the Georgetown Transformation Program that we had worked with the various partners, particularly the state government, the Jabatan Warisan Negara, and hundreds of private actors and community activists and community institutions that then eventually give birth to the transformation that we have seen in Georgetown. Now, one of the things that we advocate is always to say that have a big vision, a big plan, but think big, act small, and that has been the pathway that we have chosen for ourselves to move forward. These are some of the kind of intervention that have created the large-scale transformation. Buildings that were decayed or burned down or hollowed out were transformed to become spectacular new users. In this case, this was transformed to become a boutique hotel that has become a globally winning, award winning. But interestingly, is that it's also helped to revive a lot of the use of historical new materials, to use new historical materials in new uses and so on. The craft and the art that built this rich history of shop houses has been reproduced in a form of new use. This again is another mansion that has been transformed. What is known as the Farquhar Street Mansion House in 1878 has been transformed again for another adaptive new use. Again, we also worked with communities. Again, we felt that it's fundamental to strengthen communities and the use of the assets to be repurposed, and this has been transformed. Parks were re-established. Even when we were working with the the process of establishing a new park, this neighborhood which had declined, and eventually this particular flea market started anchoring in the city. It created a sort of like a negative spiral that contributed to the negative spiral of the area. And we had to work with the flea market traders to reorganize and relocate them and allow that some level of continuity of the activity, while the area that we, through various engagement also, that we designed a new park that was there, that was established to support the area renewal. Now this was the transformation that we saw as a result of this improvement to this area park and various rehabilitation of buildings. This particular precinct in Georgetown has become like a focal point where we see the high level of visitor interest. In fact, there's been new types of businesses and new types of production also have emerged that relates to the digital sector, that relates to the art sector, that relates to the creative sector. And we see that, one of the key things that we observe is that there is a strong relationship between place and the creative and cultural sector. And I think unlocking the value of place eventually helps stimulate the growth of the cultural and creative sector. And that's one of the pathways that we chose for Georgetown as we move forward. Again, these are some of the new types of users that have emerged as a result of the transformation, where the park has now also been part of a process. Obviously, with the COVID situation, things have have going through a rough patch, but we believe in a post-COVID world, things will re-emerge, and or even in an age where we need to live with COVID, we will find new ways of adapting to the new norm. Now, this transformation of Georgetown is not only the physical side of things, but it's also carrying out hundreds of intangible interventions, using arts, using festivals, using events as a very strong part of that story of transformation. Because at the end of the day, a city has to have a soul, and we believe that soul is what the creative sector is able to unlock and bring to the fore. And this has been various sets of things that has been done to preserve, because we believe part of the rich traditions of our communities needs to be protected, preserved, recorded, and also communicated. These are type of that we have seen that how Georgetown is transforming, new users and so on. Now, over the last decade, I think what we wanted to highlight was that we have spent nearly about 100 million ringgit in terms of supporting the various programs in not only in Penang but across other cities where this program has been expanded. We have done more than nearly 700 projects. What's interesting is that we've been able to for every dollar that we have spent, we're able to get a co-investment ratio of nearly 3 times, which means that there are nearly 300 million that has co-invested with us. And the economic impact is nearly closing into 1 billion ringgits. And it has also been supporting what they call hundreds of new businesses. Areas have been regenerated, thousands of new jobs, and new types of activities have emerged and so on. So it's clear that what they call area transformation is one fundamental pathway towards supporting the creative cultural sector. And we believe that this requires not only to be led by the government, but it can be established and run together in partnership with the various communities and the private sector. Now, the story of the expansion now is that with the confidence of Georgetown, now we're expanding what we call the emerging new cultural creative district in Penang, where we are looking to expand and create what we call the larger area transformation of the Penang Bay, where we believe this is going to be the next phase of Penang's future, whereby we see that the anchoring and the creation of an economy based on culture that will set Penang apart from the rest in the region. So that's an ambition that we have set out there, and we hope that this is something that we can realize over the next decade. To kickstart this, we have used Georgetown as our laboratory, and where we are looking at going beyond heritage tourism and whatever that we see today, but to build a new a new creative tech precinct that will support the transformation of Georgetown to move up in value and transform as the city progresses ahead. Now, let me just quickly also share that what lessons can we draw upon those who have been much successful in the West, as well as some Eastern examples to see how area transformation has been a very significant part of anchoring and creation of the cultural sector. Probably I will start with Bilbao. I think many of you are familiar with Bilbao in the sense that the story of Bilbao, which was once an industrial city in a state of decay and decline, and you know, many of those who know the story of the Basque region has been always there was, you know, peace was only established in the 80s in the Basque region, and it was a very rough period in the Basque history, but through a process of regeneration and rehabilitation since the 90s, the Basque region has transformed. In fact, what has seen is that great museums now has been established at the Guggenheim. The city has transformed. The cultural creative sector has grown roots, and in fact, it has become one of the new engines of growth in Spain. The Bilbao effect, as many have known, is kind of not unique, but rather it is something that has now been considered and been adopted in other parts of the world. Now, is this for Malaysia? There's some lessons that we can take and heed upon, where a place transformation has significantly contributed through a systematic process of rehabilitation and regeneration that has enabled the creation of a cultural and creative sector. Again, this is a story of Bilbao, where the approach has been what you call. This is Barcelona, where again, similarly, Barcelona took a slightly different approach. It has approached whereby regeneration is to regenerate different parts of the city, and they used global events as a very significant part of the story of transforming and to fuel the growth of what we call the cultural and creative sector. In fact, both, I would say that what you call Barcelona has become and has gained reputation as a world center for art, architecture, and design and technology. In fact, if anything that happens in this area, definitely Barcelona ranks very high, and is seen to be what you call a model for area regeneration, sustainability, and the development of the cultural and creative sector. These are some data points that I will let you all have and review later. But this is another example, the Eastern example of, again, a process of regeneration. Now, in this case of Cairo, I think the regeneration has helped to rehabilitate the poorest districts of Cairo. This park was established from what was a 1,000-year-old dump site. The 1,000-year-old dump site has become a green oasis and has become a new source of life. And in supporting the regeneration of the area, which was once depressed on a state of decline. And it is here that we now are seeing the growth of a new sets of initiatives and new types of economy, new types of economic activity. Now, again, in the countries that have less ability also have seen the investment into large-scale regeneration and rehabilitation programs. Again, this is some images of the kind of transformation this has taken place and how this remains to be a green oasis and a source of hope for the city. And this one is another area transformation. This was done in India. What started with the rehabilitation of the Mughal gardens in the Humayun's tomb eventually expanded into a program of rehabilitating the whole, what you call Humayun's tomb. Humayun's tomb was built and probably was earlier period monument before the Taj Mahal, but and probably Taj Mahal was inspired from the Humayun's tomb. Combined with what is known as the Sundar Nasri Nizamuddin Basti, this area transformation has become a very great source of inspiration for the city of Delhi, and not only for the city of Delhi, but rather for Asia as a whole. What they also have done creatively is that they also have not only revived and renewed traditional architecture, traditional gardens and area, but rather they also have introduced new users. In fact, they have created a whole underground museum, which is supposed to be opening in October 2020, but with COVID, these events have been postponed. I believe the museum is all ready now, and in fact, probably sometime in the coming months, we will hear the news of this underground museum that has been opened. Again, this is to creativity and innovation that they would be able to rehabilitate a site, even that which is highly sensitive and historical. Now, closer home, I think this is one of the things that we have been actively been advocating, where we think that Malaysia has got great potential, particularly in rehabilitating our historical urban fabric across the different cities in Malaysia. But I would like to focus in my closing on looking at Kuala Lumpur, where we look at the historic core of Kuala Lumpur, where we are naming it as downtown Kuala Lumpur as the cultural and creative district of Kuala Lumpur. And it is here that we believe that the roots of the future of what we call the cultural and creative sector can be built and taken advantage of. Over the last 2-3 decades, this place have started falling to disuse as government, judiciary, finance started relocating. So a lot of what we have seen here is that area was on a state of decay and decline, similar to Georgetown. And it was in a state of what you call post-state of heritage conservation, and it was on a negative spiral. But downtown Kuala Lumpur, KL tomorrow, we believe will become a vibrant and resilient part of the KL's future. In fact, we believe will be the jewel in the crown. It will be driven by an economy based on culture and creative and innovation, where we will see that it will eventually contribute to not only the creative production, but high value-added spending and value creation. The vision is to create an inclusive, authentic, viable, creative and cultural district that knits together the historic fabric to enhance its livability and visitor appeal. We're already seeing the new energy emerging. If you were to visit downtown Kuala Lumpur today, you will find that what do you call, a lot of new types of businesses that are emerging, whether it's from the Zhongshan art space in Kampung Atap down to private initiatives, as well as some things that we have been continuously been supporting. So these are some images of projects that we have been actively been involved, and it is bringing a new sort of like energy into the city. The KLCCD is based on a 6-step strategy. This is something that we are working together with DDKL. There is a formal plan and a strategic master plan that has been put together that is now being adopted into the Kuala Lumpur 2040 structure plan, so that this is not just a policy document. Rather, we are taking a very plan-led approach towards creating what we call the creative and cultural district. These are the 6 strategies that is required in order to build this, enhancing the creative cultural ecosystem. Because if we think this is fundamental, we need to strengthen and build that ecosystem and deepen it, improve the state of conservation, rehabilitate the area, improve the public realms. On this part, we have seen significant improvement efforts by the city government, and also there's been a huge amount what we call effort on the item 4, where accessibility and connectivity. Anybody in Kuala Lumpur, in Klang Valley today can reach the what we call downtown KL. In fact, 7 or 8 million Kuala Lumpur residents have direct access, because this is the most accessible public transport hub in Kuala Lumpur today. And part of the strategy in the future is also we hope that if this area is successful in terms of regenerating, we hope to repopulate the city center, and obviously we are now in the process of establishing a governing framework and a regulatory mechanism to support the process of rehabilitation and regeneration. So these are some of the things that we have been working with, that we are trying to collaborate to support the rehabilitation of some of the monuments. We're also supporting the rehabilitation of some of the historic buildings, shop houses, new businesses. We're also working to adapt some of what we call post-Merdeka heritage and rehabilitation of spaces. There are various actors and collaborators in this program, and we like to shout out to many of them who are actively supporting the process. And we heard earlier today about Maybank. We also hear from PNB, who are building the 118 tower, and there are many other private businesses who are actively looking to consider to see how they can be part of the journey of making this a jewel in the crown. These are some of the initiatives. I'm just highlighting this in particular was working with Prasarana. We were able to transform what we call the Masjid Jamik LRT station into a public space, and we demonstrated that the public can get access to high quality art, and this was run for nearly a 2-year period, and we saw that every time a performance has been held, we see nearly 20 to 30,000 people viewing it, and then there's been nearly more than 130 shows that has been done over this period. And these are some of the examples of transformation. I would like to focus on my conclusion to say that there is a great need for what we call the public, private, and the cultural sector to actively collaborate We all have various strengths, but however, there's also various gaps and there's a need for connecting and synergizing. And unless and if only that this happens, that the value of the synergy can be unlocked. In the absence of that, then this will be a suboptimal outcome, is what we continue to see. The key takeaways, probably I would like to close out my presentation. As I said earlier, that requires a holistic and a joint approach with all relevant sectors to create a place-led rejuvenation as one pathway to boost the cultural economy. As we said, the cultural economy in Malaysia is about 2%. Globally, that is 3 to 5%. There's huge room for growth in Malaysia. We believe that will only grow in the future, and we believe that growth is going to become a very significant part of Malaysia's future. The question is that, are we as stakeholders ready to take up the challenge and build the sector? Second is a greater cooperation and co-investment between the sectors can yield faster and greater results, but that requires both government and the private sector to actively play their roles. We think government should consider systematically taxing, or in some other countries where tax revenues are invested in the cultural and creative sector, and that investment eventually becomes what builds the new future for those countries. Similarly, Malaysia can learn from the experiences in other parts of the world how tax revenues can be a part and parcel of the process of supporting the sector. We believe there's a need for active contribution from the private sector, and private sector should go beyond the idea of a CSR. There's great benefits of nurturing, cultivating the cultural economy, because in the future, it is not only about economic benefit, but rather the cultural creative economy also provides the significant social benefits, which is important especially in building an inclusive and in an inclusive nation, as well as ability for arts to bring that kind of happiness and cheer in everyday life. And lastly, I think that we all need to look at new ways of financing opportunities, because we are in a stage where there's a great need for new innovation about how the private and public sectors and communities can support the growth of this sector. With that, I thank Chandana for giving us this platform to share. And if there's any question, then we'd be happy to answer this.
Okay, thank you very much, Hamdan, for that very, very interesting presentation. I mean, you gave us a lot of good insights about a very interesting topic, something that we sometimes take a little bit for granted. Hamdan, just one thing. There are a lot of questions that are being asked at the moment about your very cool topic. Unfortunately, in the spirit of time, what we're going to encourage all our participants who are asking those questions through the box, we can ask them to take it offline and get in touch with you through the chat box.
I would be happy to respond to them, yes.
Yeah, so if you could just respond to them there, I would love to share it with you, with everybody here openly through conversation, but time does not permit that, yeah? So on behalf of everybody here and on behalf of our event here today, which is Creative Economy 2021 Forum, Focus on Arts and Culture, thank you very much for your time, and we'll definitely have you back for another, this same topic and other interesting topics as well in terms of thinking smart city.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.